Hi, my name is Jon Stolpe, and I'm an author. I wrote my first book almost a year ago, little over a year ago. April 22nd is when it actually released for sale, and the book is called On Track: Life Lessons from the Track and Field. I live in the Philadelphia area in Pennsylvania, way across the country from where you guys live, and I'm excited today to be part of your Ask an Author series. I hope you'll learn a lot through my journey. I'm going to answer some of the questions that you brought to me or you sent to me, and I hope that they'll help you. I hope that they'll encourage you to consider writing a book, because you know what? You can do it. It takes a little bit of work, but it's something that even an engineer like me can do, and I know you can do it too. I hope you'll learn a lot through these questions. Thank you so much. And if you stick around at the end, I have a question for you as well. Hi, this question came from Caleb, who's in kindergarten, and he asked, what kind of books do you write? That's a great question, Caleb. So far, I've only written one book, and the book is called On Track: Life Lessons from the Track and Field. And it's all about taking lessons that I observed from the world of the track and field and tying it in to things that we can learn for life. So, for example, I wrote about the starting blocks. If you've ever watched a sprint race, the racers get in to the starting blocks at the beginning of the race. And when they do that at the beginning of the race, they have to listen to the instruction of the officials. They have to make sure they're wearing the right clothing. They have to be alert so that they can hear the sound of the gun. And then they've got to be still, because if they're not still, they'll be disqualified. And I talk about in that chapter about how it's important to listen to God's voice. He's the big instructor for us. To wear the armor of God. Ephesians 6 talks about making sure that we are clothed correctly as we head into the Christian life that we lead. And then I talk about the importance of being alert to the opportunities that we may have that come our way. So far, that's the only book I've written, but I'm hoping to write a few more. I want to write one about short-term missions. I've got some other ideas for some other books that I'm working on as well. Appreciate the question, Caleb. Hope that helps. This question comes from Gabrielle, who's in first or second grade. And her question was, how long did it take to write your book? That's an interesting question. For me, my book started about a year before I actually wrote it, with a couple of blog posts that I wrote. I don't know if you're familiar with a blog, but a blog is basically like a website where I can write posts for for people who read my blog on a regular basis. And I write on my blog every day. My blog, to get to my blog, you actually go to my name, jonstolpe.com, and you can read about different things. Well, about a year before I actually wrote the book On Track, I wrote 3 or 4 posts about observations that I learned from the track and field world. I was starting to get ideas for another book that I'm still working on, and I thought that I needed to try something a little different first, something maybe a little easier. So I started writing the book about track. And it took me about 2 or 3 months to get it all pulled together. I spent maybe a month and a half writing the book and tying it all together. And then I had to go through several iterations of editing it. I hired an editor to help with making sure that my words were correct. I hired somebody to help do the cover to make sure that my cover looked really nice. And then I went through several iterations of making sure that it looked just right when I published it. And so probably it took me about 3 months from the time I said, all right, I'm going to write my book, to the time I was able to publish it. Thanks for the question, Gabrielle. Have a great day. The next question comes from 3rd and 4th grade student Elizabeth, and she asks, why did you start writing? When I was your age, I enjoyed writing. And actually, when I think back to it, when I was in 2nd grade, I actually wrote a little book about rainbows and the colors of rainbows. For some reason, that comes to mind as I start to explain my story here, the answer to your question. And through high school, I was pretty good at English. I went through honors English and did okay, but my love was always towards math and science, which is why I went into engineering. Seems kind of crazy, but years later, I was doing small group ministry at my church, and my small groups pastor encouraged me to start writing a blog. And so I really started writing a blog at the encouragement of somebody else, and that was almost 8 years ago that I started that. And so from that, I've written over 1,500 blog posts, and I have all kinds of ideas about books and things like that I would like to do someday. And it really is something different for me. I enjoy writing a lot more than I did when I was younger because it taps into a different part of my brain that I don't always get to use at work where I'm an engineer. Great question, Elizabeth. Hope that helps. The next question comes from Malky, and I believe somebody else asked this question as well, Alexa. They asked, who is your favorite author that is not yourself? And that's an interesting question. I read a lot of different books. One of my favorite fiction writers is John Grisham, and he writes a lot of different mysteries and things like that I really enjoy. So that's probably my favorite fiction writer. My favorite nonfiction writer is a tougher one because I read a lot of nonfiction books. But one of them that I really enjoy is Mark Batterson. Mark's written several books that have encouraged me in my faith. He wrote a book called The Prayer Circle. He wrote a book called Primal. He's written several other books that have really just been great books that I've enjoyed. Hope that answers your question. The next question comes from Sarah, who's a middle school student, and she asks, where do I go for inspiration? And inspiration comes to me from all around. It's really a matter of opening my eyes and observing what's happening around me. So my book about track came from observing what was going on at my kids' track meets. And I just enjoy being with them. I enjoy watching what they were doing on the track and field and loved observing what else was going on. So that's one place where I got my inspiration. I get my inspiration for a lot of things. On my blog, I write about stretch. I'm almost 6'6" tall. You can't tell by the photo here, the video here. But when I started my junior year of high school, I was only 5'6". So I've grown almost a foot since then. And along the lines, people started calling me Stretch. And that nickname has come to mean more than just my physical stretching, my body stretching. It's also meant to mean how I'm stretching inside. And so I stretch every day by the things that happen around me. And I blog and I write about the stretch marks that are happening to me. What is stretching me and what's stretching me now? So the books I write, or the books I intend to write, are really inspired by the things that are stretching me. Hope that helps. The next question comes from Lauren, who's a 3rd or 4th grade student, and she asks, is it hard to write a book? I could answer that from a couple of different standpoints. For one, when you think about it, yeah, it's kind of hard to write a book. There's a lot that goes into it. You really have to have your mind engaged in what's going on, and you want to make sure that you're clear in what you're sharing, because if you want your book to be successful, you want to make sure your content is really good. So that can be hard if you don't put the dedication into it. But honestly, sometimes the writing flows fairly easily. The real work comes after you've written the book, or after you've written the book proposal, and you have to get it cleaned up and polished and get a cover on it and get it into the system for people to buy. I self-published my book, which means I had to do most of that work myself. I ended up hiring an editor who worked through my book and edited it. I had several people read it before I published it so that they could give me feedback as well. And there was a lot of just cleanup that I had to do along the way. So the writing of the book wasn't the hardest thing. It was really a lot of the stuff that went into publishing the book afterwards, getting it to market, announcing it to the world and getting other people to talk about it. Those are the things that are really hard in today's publishing world. And that's the hardest part for me about writing a book. The other part I would say before I finish the question is that sometimes it can be hard. The hardest part for me of writing, the actual writing process, is finding the time to do it. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm busy at my job where I manage people, and we install building automation in all kinds of buildings all over the Philadelphia area. And that keeps me busy. I'm also busy in my church, and I'm busy keeping track of whatever my kids are doing. I also like to run and keep myself fit. So finding time to write is one of the challenging parts for me. Once I sit down and do it, it actually comes fairly easy most of the time. Hope that helps, Lauren. Thanks for the question. I'm back. Thanks again for all the questions that you sent my way. It made me think and appreciate the journey that I've been through as an author. And again, I hope that it'll encourage you to consider being an author as well. Now it's my turn to ask you a question. Here's my question. Actually, it's maybe two questions. First of all, if you were going to write a book, what would it be about? I'd love to hear about it. Maybe you have a title for it. Feel free to send me your responses through your teachers. The other question I have is, how do you think writing a book would change your life? I'd love to hear your response. How would it stretch you? Again, you can send that through your teacher. Thanks for all the great questions, and I hope you enjoyed this time to ask an author any question. Have a great day, and keep writing and keep stretching.